Tom Pelissero back here on the Rich Eisen Show, and so much to talk about with you, Tommy P, NFL Network insider. Let's start off with your tweet you sent out about Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to start talking to each other about staying together? Is that what you're saying, Tom?
They've been talking about staying together. And by the way, what's up to my boys in studio
here?
here?
Tommy, back with goodness, yes.
What up, G?
They've been talking really. Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy met extensively over the past 3 days and talked about everything that happened in 2024 and also about the future. How do they do better in 2025? What they have not gotten to yet are the financials. And that goes beyond a contract for Mike McCarthy. It's also about bringing back his assistants because remember, basically the entire staff has their contracts up. They also, just like Mike McCarthy, if they don't have contracts by next Tuesday, can accept jobs elsewhere. What I am told is that Jerry plans to call McCarthy's agent, Don Yee, today and launch things in terms of at least talking, if not negotiating, about what a new contract looks like here. It's not a guarantee that this gets done by Tuesday. Okay, there's different ways that this can go. We know that Jerry Jones likes to take contract matters in many cases down to the wire. I would fully anticipate that this could go all the way up until McCarthy's contract is due to expire on Tuesday. But the sides are definitely, from what I'm told, on the same page about this in terms of seeing if there's a path to move forward together here. If they're able to get the contract done, Mike McCarthy is going to be back in 2025 with the Cowboys. If they can't, by the time his contract expires on Tuesday, then I anticipate there's going to be other teams that still have an interest in potentially bringing in McCarthy for an interview for their head coaching job. So critical 72 hours or so ahead.
Okay, let's talk about the Raiders firing Tom Telesco after firing Antonio Pierce. The general sense is there is the Tom Brady fingerprints on this because he is now a member of ownership and is going to have a large say on what to do next, and that this is Tom Brady's ship to run, that Mark Davis has essentially turned to one of the most decorated football players ever on the Mount Rushmore and say, welcome to ownership, now run it. Is that oversimplifying things, or is that really what's happening in Las Vegas right now, Tom?
I would say, Rich, that is pretty close to reality right now. This is the Tom Brady show in Las Vegas. And really, Tom Brady throughout the course of this season, even though, he's traveling around doing games every Sunday for Fox, he's got a million different businesses that he's involved with. His kids are in Florida. He's got a lot going on in his life, but he's also, even though he's not allowed in the production meetings, he's talked with, interfaced with a lot of different coaches throughout the course of the season. He reached out recently to his old coach, Bill Belichick, about what it would take for Belichick to come to Las Vegas. And in recent days, he's been reaching out and being directly involved in terms of who exactly is going to be coming in for interviews for the Raiders head coaching job. With specific regard to Tom Telesco, I can't entirely say why there was a 2-day gap between the firing of Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco. I know that on Monday night, there were meetings with Mark Davis and his advisors. Tom Brady was weighing in there as well, in which it seemed like there was a good chance both were going to be out. But, Mark Davis went into Antonio Pierce's office around noon on Tuesday and fired him. Telesco was still in the building. He met with the coaches. He was a part of setting up, some of the logistical things in terms of setting up a coaching search. And then Mark Davis came to him yesterday and said, actually, you're going to be out too. And everything I'm told is this is because Tom Brady believes that to have a chance to set up the right culture, a chance to have success in the football operation, you can't have a new head coach coming in and inheriting a general manager from the prior regime. If we know one thing, Rich, about Mark Davis, it's that he is a fan. He wants to win.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same guy who, after a 3-month-long losing streak, they win those games week 16 and 17. And, he's running around the locker room going, Raiders, Raiders. Like he really wants to win. And he trusts different people. There's different people in his ear. In this case, it's Tom Brady who's taken over. If history were any guide, you'd say there's also a possibility that a couple of years from now, Tom Brady will be out of favor and whoever he brings in will be out too. But, the hope is always that they're going to get it right this time. If you're going to trust anybody, why not a 7-time Super Bowl winning quarterback who, has a lot of contacts within the league, has a really good feel for football. And by all accounts, Rich is embracing this opportunity to remake an organization that he just bought into on a minority stake a couple months ago.
Well, and a follow up here on that, Tom, is the Belichick portion of it. And, your report saying that many have reached out to Bill, and Tom is one of them, about to, how committed are you? Here, can you grab a cocktail napkin in Chapel Hill and write a resignation as the HC of UNC on it? Immediately what comes out is here he is on the recruiting trail in Oradell, New Jersey with this kid, and his Twitter account's filled with photographs of kids that he's recruiting, and he has no plans. His commitment is to what he's doing. You hear those phrases all the time in our world, and then all of a sudden it switches. Is there a possibility that somebody coughs up $10 million and buys out Bill, and he is a head coach in the NFL by the end of this month? Tom?
Here's where I would start with this, Rich. I would say, Mike Lombardi is a very entertaining guy. He did a publicity tour yesterday in which I believe he called my report a 100% falsehood, and then followed it up by confirming virtually every detail in that report. I never said Bill Belichick was leaving, that anything was imminent. I said there have been calls. And in fact, other outlets also have since confirmed that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick did speak about the job. So that's real. Bill Belichick, having heard from other organizations, is real. Does anything end up happening? That's still to be determined. Right now, we have 6 head coaching vacancies in the NFL. We potentially could have another 1 or 2 that pop up here in the coming weeks, again, depending on things like what happens with Mike McCarthy in Dallas, what potentially happens with any of the playoff games, and if anybody decides to make a later move in this cycle. There's only a few surefire candidates. It's really, in talking to league people for weeks, it's Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson, and then he caught in a draw line. I would also put Aaron Glenn into that category. I know that he interviewed really well with the Jets. He's really sharp, and he's obviously coming from a good program. He's a former player. He's an energy guy and a culture guy. I do think that Aaron Glenn's got a really good chance, whether that's the Jets, the Saints. Every team requested him. The only team he turned down was New England, based upon a variety of different factors with how the Patriots are operating in their search here. But once you get past those 2 or 3 guys, who are you hiring? Are you going into the older bucket of Pete Carroll and John Gruden? Pete's had a couple of interviews. John Gruden, I would still anticipate his name is going to come up here. Are you taking a swing at one of the younger guys, the Liam Cohens of the world? Or do you call a guy who's got 8 Super Bowl rings and is currently, driving around and wearing a black suit, taking photos with a bunch of 16-year-olds at high schools around North Carolina? It's a picture that still is unusual. I don't want to say disconcerting, but it's definitely, you just see it, and it still is weird to see Bill doing this here. Yeah, sure. Is he committed as much as any head coach in college football has ever committed? I'm sure that, when it comes down to it, and if Bill's the head coach of North Carolina in September, he's going to be doing everything he can to go out there and win those football games. We're still early in the search process. And if anything were to happen, if Bill were to listen, and by the way, again, he took Tom Brady's call, he has listened, then that might still be a couple of weeks away here. So we continue to stay tuned on exactly what the future is going to hold for Bill Belichick. You would say at the moment, he does not have an NFL offer, and so the odds are good that he stays in North Carolina. If somebody reaches out and decides to bring him in for an interview and makes an offer, we'll see how committed he truly is.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Deshaun Watson having surgery to repair an already surgically repaired Achilles. His availability for 2025 is now completely in doubt. Browns second overall on the clock. Does this increase the likelihood we see quarterback in April to start the draft, Tom?
Well, it's going to depend on a lot of factors, Rich, and part of it is something that I talked about on this show last week that seemed to have become a bit of a viral sensation thanks to various aggregators taking one sentence of it out of context. There's real questions about how high those top quarterbacks are ultimately going to go in the draft between Shedeur Sanders, between Cam Ward. If Drew Lohr decides to come out, obviously a really rough ending for him last night with Penn State. We're so early. There's very few times. There's very few Andrew Lucks, Trevor Lawrence's, where at this stage in the process, that guy's going number one. Caleb Williams even was pretty clear, probably going to be the number one pick. He ended up being that. But Jaden Daniels, in some scouts' minds, people liked him a lot too. It's very early. It's January. We're not through All-Star season, combine, meetings, school visits, pro days, all that stuff. I would say from the Browns' perspective, they were always going to have to get a quarterback, if not more than one quarterback. That could come through the draft, free agency, or both. They have been doing work for months on the quarterbacks, as every team, does, but the Browns certainly have known that this has to be a focus based on the level of play they've gotten out of Deshaun Watson. I also think it's notable that they made the offensive coordinator change, Rich, for a second consecutive offseason. And people can look at that and say, well, why are you moving on from Ken Dorsey? He only called plays the second half of the season after Watson got hurt. And that part was unusual because the idea of it was Dorsey was going to come in with some of the things you see from Buffalo, spread principles. He was going to help, Deshaun Watson get back to doing some things he did really well in Houston and in college. It just never fit. And so this is very much Kevin Stefanski, who 2 years ago won 11 games, went to the playoffs with 5 different starting quarterbacks, including Deshaun Watson playing prior to his injury, the best football we had seen him play in his time in Cleveland. They're going to double down, going back to what Stefanski's offensive philosophy is. He's going to bring in people who know that system, and there's going to be, whether Deshaun Watson's a factor or not, I think it's fair to say with an Achilles revision in January, there's very little possibility that Deshaun Watson is the week one starting quarterback here. So you're probably adding multiple quarterbacks in the offseason, and they feel the value's there at number 2. They're going to go that direction.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. Injuries for this weekend. Zay Flowers is out. Hurts is back. Marshawn Lattimore's back, right? You want to run down anything that's in your notebook as to who's going to be playing this weekend that was questionable or anything of that nature? Tom, what do you have for me?
I'd say the only things beyond that is both the Eagles receivers have been banged up in recent weeks. A.J. Brown's had that knee issue that's been ongoing for years now, but it flares up at various times. The fact that they rested him during a week of a playoff game would indicate that they really want to be careful making sure he's 100% for Sunday. And then Devontae Smith also did not practice today. He's been dealing with back tightness. He got banged up in the final game that he played in the regular season. So just something to keep an eye on here. All those guys are expected to go, but listen, things like back tightness, that can pop up in a game as well. So that would certainly be one thing to keep an eye on as we get to the weekend. Green Bay's the other one. Christian Watson suffering an injury. I mean, Watson's been their best receiver when he's been healthy, but the issue has been he's very, very rarely healthy. That was a serious injury, season ending and then beyond. We'll see where he's at for 2025, but it's an ACL and more. So Jordan Love now not going to have one of his top receivers. Romeo Doubs, who didn't play last week because of an illness, he's been a full participant, so it seems like he's going to be back. But, for Jordan Love, you got a tough enough task going on the road to face a really tough and physical Philly team. You're doing that with you banged your funny bone last week, which that can last a few days. He was full go in practice yesterday. No issues about him playing, but you take away the biggest speed threat, the biggest downfield threat they have. I'll be really interested to see how Matt LaFleur tries to play this game. Educated guess, when in doubt, when you've got a team that's going to take the physical fight to you and you're going on the road, Rich, I think what you're going to see is Matt LaFleur trying to combat that. Run Josh Jacobs, get the ball to Tucker Kraft, use your physical guys, try to win the line of scrimmage, just make it a dogfight type of a game. We'll see who comes out on top in that.
And then I guess last one for you, back to the coaching carousel. I mean, Ben Johnson chatting with the Patriots today. Mike Locksley of Maryland football interviewing with the Jets today. The Bears putting out a list of 13 people that they are speaking to. We're taking a look at the Raiders, who are going to bring in former Jets head coach Robert Saleh, who's going to be chatting with the Jaguars as well. I mean, I'm just throwing names out. My guy, David Shaw, chatting with the Bears. Put it all together, and Marcus Freeman is killing it right now in Notre Dame. He will be done with his season January 20th. That's one long windup for saying what's the timeline on all this stuff? Like championship weekend is when stuff's going to begin to actually settle down and coaches hired. I mean, we're going to see you're going to be out there on the sideline of the Senior Bowl. Will pretty much every job still be open at that point in time?
I
What
hope
do you
not,
think?
man, because that was stressful last year
I
when
hear ya.
Dan Quinn and Mike McDonald both got hired while I'm standing on the
I
practice field.
bet.
My thumbs are numb from being out in the cold, and I'm trying to type those tweets. Here's what I would say. So you got 6 openings. You just ran through them. New England is the only one that appears to be at a point where maybe we could get a decision sooner than later.
Huh. Why is that?
They finished Ben Johnson's interview. That's over this morning in New England. They've only done 3 others, which was Byron Leftwich, Pep Hamilton, and then, of course, Mike Vrabel. And they have no other interviews scheduled. That's not to say that we're going to get Mike Vrabel, Patriots head coach, announcement today, but they are in a position. They've fulfilled the Rooney Rule requirements. We've all known that Vrabel to New England has been the logical outcome in all of this, even before the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. And so we'll see, but they are in position that if they want to, they can strike quickly. And they've really, frankly, shown no interest in interviewing other people other than putting in a slip 2 days later for Aaron Glenn, who already had 5 other interviews lined up. And he basically told him thanks, but no thanks, and declined.
Well, usually when that happens, Tom, as you know, is that there's word on the NFL streets, that Aaron Glenn and his representation know which way the wind is blowing in New England. And the fact that, one team's got 13 names and another team's got another head coach that they have a negotiating window that lasts all the way to next Tuesday that they're opening up right now, I guess, with McCarthy. And Glenn's like, why am I going there? I know which way they're going. So does it look like it's either Ben Johnson or it's Vrabel or Leftwich or whomever they've spoken to? Tom, is that it? Is that what you're saying?
Again, they wrapped up the Ben Johnson interview, I think, like an hour ago.
Okay.
So, I'm sure that there are conversations to be had. The logical outcome in this, the most likely outcome, has always been Mike Vrabel as Patriots head coach.
Wow.
We don't have that announcement just yet. So the Jets also got into Rooney Rule compliance today by interviewing Mike Loxley. They previously interviewed Ron Rivera. Their interviews, to my understanding, are scheduled to go all the way through the early portion of next week. They've been running through people, bringing them down to Palm Beach for the guys who are available to interview in person. They've done other ones because coaches, if you're currently employed, you can't even interview in person until another, 10 days from now. It's
right
after the divisional playoff week. That's normally the window where you get the hires. That's last year. That's when Raheem Morris got hired. That's when Brian Callahan got hired. But again, you got 2 teams right now that are in Rooney Rule compliance. If they want to strike quickly, they can. And all the other ones, listen, I get a lot of texts and calls about what's happening in these places. The Jets, like you said, are interviewing everybody. And they're going to have, roughly 15 head coaching candidates and 15 GM candidates. They'll probably whittle that down to 5 and do a second round before making a decision. The Bears were working off a list of about 24 coaches. Some of those, the Marcus Freemans, like you mentioned, not entirely available just yet. There are other coaches that are popping up as part of their process here. That one may take a while. The Jaguars just put out their slips a few days ago. They're continuing to add, some more names there. Ben Johnson is certainly a name to watch in Jacksonville, but he won't be the only one. And with the Raiders, the only slips they've put in, I believe, are Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, and Steve Spagnuolo, plus setting up the interviews with Saleh and with Pete Carroll. That's, like we talked about, that's a Tom Brady production there. I don't know necessarily that that's the entire list. I would anticipate that there are more requests that go in. But the big dominoes, the big dogs in all this are Vrabel and Ben Johnson. Keep an eye on those and on different timelines. Vrabel can be hired the moment I get off this show, hopefully not before. Ben Johnson, he technically can't be hired until after the Lions are eliminated from the playoffs, although there's plenty of precedent of agents and teams being in a good place to know, hey, this is going to be the guy. We're going to work out the contract once you're eliminated from the playoffs here. I would anticipate, Ben Johnson, even if the Lions are still alive, he would have a window to do a second interview after the conference championship games. At that point, by like the Monday or Tuesday of that week after conference championships, you'll have a pretty good idea of where he and Aaron Glenn are going to end up if the Lions are still in it.
Tom, you the man, as always. I can help with the virality my platform is the platform. After that, the way you're
People are so
aggregated,
angry.
I can't do anything. I can't do anything. The way you're aggregated, I cannot be held responsible. You know what I mean?
No, I did appreciate that you posted the actual video of my more extended comments as opposed to the 3-word out of context version that made the rounds initially here. So you're doing your part, Rich. But I really appreciate it.
Attaboy. We'll see you over the weekend for NFL Game Day morning. That's Tom Pelissero.
Right here. Fellas. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks,
right
man.
back at you. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.